We'll volunteer to go next.
Okay, Cecilia. So you got Kendrick Lamar. And then
Yes,
Cecilia, who do you want me to make the host?
I'll go ahead and be the host.
You're good to go. And then again, just remember for your group to turn on the camera so we can see you while you guys are presenting.
All right. Can you all see?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so this is our presentation. We did Mama by Kendrick Lamar, and we're going to be talking about how we interpreted the song through our own perspectives. And then the theme, Melissa, if you could go ahead and explain that.
You're on mute.
Sorry. So the song is based on his album To Pimp a Butterfly. And to me, it stood out how, you know, in the beginning of his career, oh, sorry.
Okay, there we go.
So to me, the song was based in his album, and I thought it would be a good theme to start off with him blooming into a new version of himself, because from a pimp to me means from him back then taking on his career as, oh, I made it and I'm gonna be like a pimp, right? Into more of his album where he goes back into his African roots and flutters into something else. So that's why I chose that theme.
All right, Jocelyn, go ahead and share the thesis.
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. So our thesis is that Kendrick embodies a Black American following the footsteps of West American ideals, predominantly through the glorification of material riches, until he diverts his path and takes a trip to Africa and has an epiphany of a Pan-Africanism and reconnection with his heritage. Kendrick's purpose of Mama was to celebrate and share the experience of awakening to the idea that Africa was dirty, starting, uncivilized, as perceived by the West, is false, and that Africa is wealthier in both materials and its culture and heritage and people. Kendrick does this by selecting the chorus and it to be sung rather than rapped, with an echoey effect to represent his ancestors watching over him, and the juxtaposition of pre-African Kendrick in verse 1 to post-African Kendrick in verse 2, verse 3, and the outro, as well as how this juxtaposition is heard through how the music changes from chill to more hype, especially around the outro, as Kendrick has changed too. And then verse 1. Verse 1 is a representation of Kendrick prior to visiting Africa, aside from the small snapshot of his joy from visiting, when he says, "This is my euphoria." And then this Kendrick gloats on his riches and fame as a rapper in the America, the West, and values his worth and accomplishments on materialism in the same manner that the West does. His ignorance due to living in the West is exemplified in verse 1's line, "By innocence limited, the experience lacked," in contrast to verse 2's line, which are the majority "I know" statements. And yep, next person.
So for verse 2, the way I interpreted it is he's referring to Africa, and he starts off by saying he thinks he knows everything from the streets of Compton and the glory of fame and about what is truly important in life. And this helps him come to realization that in fact he didn't know anything the day he came back home, and he has never experienced anything like the conditions people are living in Africa. So he realizes that, you know, everything that we have here is nothing compared to what they have over there. People are dying of thirst and hunger, and yet here we are provided to it, and we don't take it, and we take it for granted. So in this verse, he explains how we need to become more appreciated of everything that we have.
All right, so I'm going to be discussing verse 3. And for me, I felt like Kendrick was talking about a boy, and it's either him or a boy who reminds him of how he was when he was younger. And the reason I thought this was because of how Kendrick described him. He's Black, hence the terms resembles my features, nappy afro, black ashy ankles, and he provides more context with the term hand-me-down sneakers, showing that he's poor. And I believe home for him is Africa because um, he grew up in an entirely different place in America. And the reason why was because of the terms ancestors, which makes me think that either the boy or him is in Africa. And then you forgot because of what public schools had painted, it makes me believe his influence from growing up in America makes his mindset and perspective very different. And towards the end of this verse, I believe it's trying to say that it's important to stay in touch with his roots. And as a boy states in this verse, who also mentions for Kendrick to be an advocate for those he knows, to spread awareness and to come home. And I think this simply means that it's important for Kendrick to expose others to understand their roots, because it's so important in order for them to realize their identity and who they are and their purpose.
For my slide, I had the outro of the song, and since it's the last part of the song, the verses that stood out to me was, I've been looking for you my whole life, an appetite for the feeling I can barely describe, where you reside. And to me, this goes with the very beginning of the outro because he seems to be missing something in his life, and he didn't know what that was. And he doesn't know if it was in money, if woman, self-love, self-worth, or mankind. And with his second part of the outro, he says, is it in a woman? Is it in money or mankind? Tell me something. I'm losing my mind. And that's why I think that's what he was missing. And he also says, maybe I'm paranoid, huh? Maybe I don't need you anyway. Don't lie to me. I'm suicidal anyway. And I believe this is from Kendrick Lamar's background of going through depression and suicidal situation in his life, going through depression with also his life in Compton. And I think that was good background on the outro because he also says, I could be your advocate. I can preach for you if you tell me what the matter is. And to me, it's more about him willing to be an advocate, even if he has fame, even if he was a pimp before. And to speak up for the people who also were lost in themselves, who don't know their background history of being like him. You know, him being suicidal also could be from not knowing who he is as a person, not knowing his touch basis. It could be money, because to me, even if he has money, even if he could have had women, he still didn't know who he was as a person. And that's what I think what was important for the ending of the song, to tie it all together, that in the end, he might still be suicidal, but at least he knows who he is, and maybe that's going to help him. So that's all.
Okay, so now we're going to be talking about how this song relates to today's society.
The first bullet point is Black people being seen more dominantly in higher positions of power. I think this because of the album cover. There's a crowd of Black men with him in front of the White House. It could be the White House. And to me, it's talking about how this could be the goal. This could be the future. This could be true. It could be real. And I think that's a bold statement saying, since he's gone back to his country, like in his mind, he knows how to display it in the cover of his album, also tying in with the title of the album. So I think that's how it relates to today's society, how people could have dominant positions, and he's advocating that.
Okay, whoever's next for the next bullet point. I think it's Jocelyn.
Sorry. I was searching. Um, so the part where growing up in American society makes it difficult to be in touch with your roots slash ancestors, can be seen across a widespread of any child of an immigrant, but also it hits especially hard for Black American race in a different way where you can't trace back who your ancestors are, really.
Yeah, and to add on to that, some examples that we see today is whatever home language that you're taught. For example, I was taught Spanish in certain, places and settings. It's inappropriate, right? I'm sure we've all heard the term, this is America, speak English. So that's one example. And then another one I felt like was very relevant was that, Black people aren't allowed to wear their hair naturally in a professional setting, which is completely outrageous. Okay, and then for the bullet point, wants to contribute to his community. I think we've seen this more often than not that, once now that he's grown to fame, he wants to be able to give back because, they're missing out on their roots and kind of like with the what I was talking about in my verse, spreading awareness to their identity and their cultures is so important and something that we still see today. So in the next 4 slides, we're going to be giving our own personal viewpoints based on the song and basically lines that we felt that spoke with us or that we felt that we could interpret through our own words.
For me, the quote that stood out was, "I know the price of life, knowing how much it's worth." And I think this correlates to me because I've grown up with my parents to teach me life values. And although Kendrick learned this in a different way, like he's going back to his roots, I personally learned it growing up with my parents because they didn't have everything they wanted. It's hard for people to come in a new country and you don't know exactly where everything is. And they taught me the life values, and I'm growing as a person too. And it also relates to me when Kendrick says, "The way I'm rewarded, well, that's God's decision." And as of now, I'm grateful for my own self worth in this life, and I'm still growing along with that. And I agree that God has its own way of rewarding a person because to me, success could also be me getting into college, Him rewarding me in that way. But at the same time, I did it in my own way too. So it's also spiritually in oneself. And also, that's all I learned mostly with the quotes.
So for my inspiration, the first one is this feeling is unmatched. This feeling is brought to you by adrenaline and good rap. And the way that I've interpreted that was I connect with music on a very spiritual level. I'm a music major and, I'm studying and I want to be a singer. And I agree that it has the capability to create, very powerful emotions. And for the next two, I kind of felt like these were the same, they shared like the same idea, which is why I kind of grouped them together. And that is, I know what I know, and I know it well not to ever forget until I realized I didn't know shit. And then the second one, make a new list of everything you thought was progress, and that was bullshit. And then the way I interpreted that was sometimes we feel like we might know everything, and what we might know technically might not always be right. And, even me, I feel like there have been times where I feel like I know enough until I make a mistake or I gain a new perspective. And a good example I could give of that would be even just walking into this class, right? Like I had no idea that I was going to be learning, something like that what I was taught in elementary and middle school was basically all a lie. So, I think that we're constantly always evolving and learning new things. And yeah, that's all I have to say for my inspiration. All right, Jocelyn, go ahead.
So the line that we've been waiting for you is a part of the chorus, and it's significant because whenever a chorus is written, it's intentionally supposed to be important because of all the repetition and emphasis. And so while notably that white Americans do not have a relationship with their ancestors the same way most POCs do, or even some certain Europeans do, such as the Celtics, and notably that like the relationships that Asians have with their ancestors, such as rituals and food, or even Moana from Disney and her grandmother, is all very different from white people, white America, and the West. And for the most part, white Americans don't just kind of think of their ancestors as deceased or ghosts, while the POCs treat them as someone who is more eternally watching, protecting, and guiding you as spirits. And then for Kendrick to discover and embrace this, he's rejecting some ideas of the West, and that's a celebration, which is why the music sounds so much more hype at the end.
So a part of the song that I chose is I know the price of life. I'm knowing how much it's worth. I know what I know, and I know it well not to ever forget until I realized I didn't know shit the day I came home. So to this, I can relate to it because growing up, I was fortunate to have hardworking parents who like always provided me with what I needed and sometimes like with what I wanted. And it wasn't until I was sent to Mexico with my two sisters that I realized that I have it good, back here at home. And my cousins were never able to ask their parents for a doll or a toy because it was always either toy or a food. And I think something that this song made me reflect on is that it's always important to never take what you have for granted and to appreciate it because it could be easily taken away and given to another person who doesn't have what you have. And yeah, that's my overall thought.
All right, that concludes our presentation. Thank you for watching.
So yeah, you guys did also a very good job. Let me, okay. So a couple of the questions that I have, questions and comments. One, I'm curious, did anybody listen to the entire album or just the song Mama?
Personally, I only listened to this song.
I listened to a few, but not gone through reading the lyrics.
Okay. Well, and the only reason I asked that is this is one album to where song one through the conclusion, they all are linked. And if you guys go back and listen to them, you'll see like the intros provide meaning to the overall project. And which you kind of see as a lot of the things that you guys are like touching on, hearing the whole album makes a lot more sense. So I would just encourage you to just go back and listen to the whole album, start to finish, to see really what Kendrick's project is up to. But from taking what the song is talking about, I think you guys' analysis was perfect. I love the fact that you guys gave your personal interpretation of the songs, and then also what parts of the song stood out to you. That really makes it personal and really shows how music connects to people at different rates and different levels. Also, Cecilia, I like how just even you talking about your insight and your passion for music, right? That lets us know what drives you. So I thought that was a good touch. Which also made me think about, especially the quote that you used, right? And you translated it to interpret it as music, right? And makes me think about like ancient African Kemetic society, where when you went to the doctor, right, how we understand a doctor to be, they would play music. And at a certain vibrations, a certain frequency of music would be healing to the organs, right? So we talk about Imhotep and how he was one of the first people to do open heart surgeries and all these type of surgeries. Part of the healing process is you would set the patient in a music room, and they would set the music frequency to a certain megahertz to allow the body to heal itself, right? You hear, I don't know if you guys are familiar with like sound baths. It's essentially the same thing. So you'll sit in a room and you'll play music, instruments, at a certain frequency that allows the body to heal. So when I heard you take the quote and the way that you interpreted the quote, to me, that invoked those thoughts. So I thought that was very dope. Johnson, I have a question, just more so for clarification. I may have misheard that. Towards the end, you were talking about ancestor worship or ancestor appreciation, and how the West does not have that attachment to the ancestors, where a lot of Eastern cultures, a lot of what you call POC, what I would call people of culture, right? They have that linkage. You mentioned Mulan, like, you know, Coco could be another example of a pop culture production that talks about ancestor worship. Well, my question as it pertains to that, were you saying that Black folks were separated or don't have access to their ancestors, or were you also lumping Black folks in the part of the POC, people of culture, who do place value on ancestors that's juxtaposed to the Western society, not placing emphasis on their ancestors?
I think that certain Black people who practice, I know there's things like witchcraft and whatnot, or things that connect where you rely on your ancestors spiritually in that way. And I know some Black people practice things like voodoo or hoodoo. And in that, not saying that voodoo hoodoo is connected to your ancestors, but within that realm, they probably do have spiritual connections to their ancestors.
Yeah, okay, so and that's why I asked the question, because I think it's important to understand and to clarify, especially if we're coming in an African studies course dealing with the African oral tradition, right? Because all that is tied up within that concept. Witchcraft, voodoo, those are Western terminologies that are used to depict African spiritual practices, right? So Ifa is a spiritual tradition that people in the West would call hoodoo or voodoo, right? These are Western terminologies that describe African ancestral practices. So very much in Ifa, right, it's about acknowledging and honoring your ancestors. Akan is another African spiritual tradition that honors and worships ancestors. Even if you are to look at Christianity, right, and Christianity is something that's largely practiced in the Black community, unbeknownst to them, that is still ancestor worship, because in effect, an ancestor is someone who you have lineage to, who is no longer occupying this physical space on this earth, right? So for the Christians who worship Jesus, unbeknownst to them, that's ancestor worship. That's someone who you have a connection to, that is no longer occupying the physical space on this planet, and now serves in the spiritual realm as an ancestor, right? So I think what happens is African people are some of the most spiritually connected people to ancestors, right? But through the institutions of enslavement, that connection has been severed, right? And what we find is, unbeknownst to a lot of African people, they are still working within that connection, but they just don't know that to call it what it is, right? We've been conditioned to believe through Christianity, through Western socialization, that ancestor worship is evil, ancestor worship is witchcraft, and things of that nature. So one, I just want to make it clear, like, I don't want you guys to leave from this class saying that Black folks don't respect, honor, or have a connection to their ancestors, right? And then two, I damn sure don't want y'all leaving this class thinking that spiritual connections from an African context to ancestors is situated within witchcraft, voodoo, and things of that nature. I'm not saying you're wrong, Jocelyn, because just like me, you grew up in the West, right? And this is how we've been taught about these things, but it's my job to clarify them, right? Another question I had, I don't remember who mentioned it, but you said because of public schools, you forgot, right? The public schools have made you forget these things. And I think that's a very important part of the song, right? And if you pay attention, it's actually the little boy who's telling Kendrick that, right? You forgot because of public schools, what they taught you. But other than that, I think you guys did a really good job of encapsulating the song. I love the theme, right? The whole idea of the butterfly, and even the way that Kendrick really teases that out. That's another thing. If you listen to the whole album, you'll see really what he's talking about with this butterfly. So I would just suggest you guys go do that. And at this point, I'll open up to other questions, comments, thoughts about the project. You guys should have questions. You should have comments.
I would like to make a comment. So I really like how they explain in depth about his connection with Africa, and the way they described it and presented it made me think back to that one reading we had. I forgot the author's name, but in the reading, the character, he was kidnapped and then he had to return to Africa, and he had two different views. So that's kind of like it connected to me with that. So I
Um,
really liked it.
Water and Spirit, Malidoma Patrice Sommet is what you're thinking of. Yeah, it's a good connection. Anybody else? Any other comments or questions? Okay, so what group wants to go next? We have Project Windows and we have Tupac, White Man's World.
Project Windows will go.
Okay. And then Miracle, who do you want me to make the co-host?
I'll do it.
Okay. You are the host.
Can you guys see it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Miracle. This is our group, Helena and Doug, and we're presenting Project Windows. Doug?
Yeah, I'm going right now. All right, so so the thesis of the whole song was of Project Window is the idea of living in the projects, which connects to institutionalized racism in our country. Due to the first set of projects being made in 1963 for Black people to live in. However, even though all races have lived in the projects, it's still another way housing inequality devalues Black people. And in that just short paragraph, it kind of hit me hard when listening to the song, because I have a friend that I lost to the projects who had played football and like just turned to the gangs and chose a different path. And one of the theoretical frameworks that we chose was critical race theory and funds of knowledge and counter storytelling. This can be shown as we see through the lyrics, not only the importance of exploring the world as a community, but also the understanding of how big of an impact education is to get out of systematic oppression. This is told through perspective of the marginalized.
Hey, real quick, Miracle, if you could put that present button on there, it'll make it full screen so that way everybody can see the whole slide. So like in your upper, what's the upper right-hand corner next to share, right? You just passed it. Go right to the, there you go. So right, it's white, there, yeah, right there. Yeah, you got it.
Okay, could you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so following what Douglas said, the analyst of the song we got out of it was to understand the overall analysis of the song. Our group separated the lyrics into 4 sections. We analyzed it by figuring out the theoretical framework, which we believe to be funds of knowledge, by then connecting to today's society. Connecting the song Project Windows to this theoretical framework involved understanding the viewpoint of Nas. As he sings, every night the same melody, house sounded so heavenly, but jail was ahead of me, speeding like amphetamine. You begin to envision what it's like throughout his community and how he has adapted to this lifestyle. He continues to express what he sees as he looks out the window, involving the chaotic noise and how he's eager to join, although he knows where it will take him. He then sings, "Yo, the hustlers and hoes, drugs and fofos. This was the life of every kid looking out project windows. This was excuse me. This explains how kids are soon to adapt just as much he has by looking out their windows to witness this all. Another thing is when they grow up in this community, they lack the education and the low income standards by you could say the racism systematic country that we live in, which is not their fault that they are growing up in this chaotic environment since they don't have the resources and they're just going by living each day as they want or eager to live.
So how this song relates to what's going on from 2010 to today. So this song relates to what's going on in today's society through the evidence of the systematic oppression that the Black community, but also that people of color still face today. This can be shown through the discussions of racism that infiltrates the education system created to the prison pipeline system. The story continues from K through 12 in Black students showing that they are more likely to be disciplined, having to deal with the criminal justice system through unfair treatment, as well as schools still being effectively segregated in predominantly Black and brown areas that are chronically underfunded. This can be related to today's society through the idea of the disadvantaged communities experiencing higher intensive police presence, as well as higher rates of incarceration and community supervision by carrying out aggressive strategies that target quality over life. Now, a lot of these times, these police officers who are in these cities, with predominantly people of color, have negative connotations of these negative connotations of these communities due to the bias that is seen in the justice system. Now, the idea of gentrification also can be connected to this song through the idea that a lot of times these low-income areas were actually people that were displaced by wealthier people who were moving in to improve housing and attracting new businesses. However, that leads these communities to be underfunded and over-policed. These centuries of displacement that destabilizes Black and Native communities. Overall, all of this just connects to what's going on in today's society.
All right, and again, another good job, you guys. Very succinct to the point. You hit all your criterias very cleanly. For me, my question is more so like inspiration. Like, how did this song inspire you, right? How did the song make you look at things differently? Douglas provided some insights to how the song impacted him just through his personal experiences. But to me, the sense and the feel of the song is very almost emotional. Just listening to the beat that's laid down, listening to Ronald Isley's vocals on the chorus of the song. So I'm just kind of more curious to each of you how the song affected you with an A, what type of emotional response the song produced.
Well, hearing the song, it was really, like you said, you could listen to it and you could hear it. Like you are visually sitting there watching what he is visualizing, and you understand every lyric that he's singing and every moment. It's like you're in the moment, which is very like touching, but it's really sad. And it just makes you feel empowered to want to help more, just do your part.
I think for me, it's when you kind of listen to the song and then you go back through and you kind of read the lyrics, it's very poetic almost in my mind. And you're able to kind of visualize everything he's talking about because he uses a lot of imagery in these lyrics. And I think that's what's like beautiful about the song, yet so true and sad. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, after listening to the song, I was like, 'cause living in the ghetto isn't easy. So I was able to really connect to it. And I was like, damn, this has been going on for a long time with projects in the ghetto, how like it's just been getting worse and worse. Well, kind of slowed down a bit, but it's still pretty bad. And it affected me in a different way. I don't know how to say it, like it just felt like something I was able to connect to, sort of.
Yeah, I think for me, have y'all like heard, are you not say necessarily fans, but are you familiar with Nas's work prior to doing this project?
Not really.
Yes.
I just know Project Windows, that was it.
Okay. Yeah, like, and the reason why I chose Nas, right? Like, he has an uncanny ability to be very vivid. Like what he says, you see it, and you guys articulate that very profoundly. He's someone to me like Baldwin. The way that Baldwin writes Nas raps. And when you talk about the oral tradition and you talk about storytelling, to me, Nas is the quintessential storyteller. Like, and if you notice, like the songs that I chose, most of them are like West Coast artists, right? We got Tupac, we got Kendrick, we got Nip, and then Nina Simone. But one of the things of New York hip hop is the story, right? They tell very good stories. If you listen to like Biggie, excellent storyteller. Ghostface Killer, excellent storyteller. To me, one of the premier storytellers is Nas. So I thought it was important to kind of have us engage his work because really it's poetry, right? It's a auditory movie that you experience through the way that he's able to articulate his work. At this point, we'll open it up to anyone else who has any questions or comments for this group. No questions, no comments? All right, so for the sake of time, Montserrat, do you feel okay to go today or do you want to just hold yours off till the final?
I think I could go. I think my presentation's pretty like simple and fast.
Okay, so I'm gonna make you the host and then you'll close it out today, okay? Actually, I might. All right, it's on you.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So for my presentation, I will be presenting on the song "A White Man's World" by Tupac. So a little background information about him is that he was a rapper and actor in the 1990s, and many people looked up to him and liked his music since he was really raw and didn't sugarcoat any issues that he wanted to address. He was born and raised in East Harlem, New York, and was shot September 7th, and 6 days later, he passed away on September 13th. The theoretical frameworks that I think could be applied to his song lyrics are the African American male theory, counter storytelling, and funds of knowledge, because we're able to see the struggles that African American people go through living in a white man's world, how he says, and how it can be hard to appreciate and be proud of where you come from. So a little song analysis was that in the song, it seems like he is writing to his sister, possibly his girlfriend as well. He is talking about how it's like to be Black and growing up and living in a white man's world and the struggles it comes with. In some interviews that I looked to like make sense and connect to the words that he puts in his music, is that he really talks about how many people push down on others to feel better than the rest. And he talks about how the rich should help out the poor more and that they should give more because the rich have so much while the poor have nothing and would like to have what they have. Some important people that he mentioned in his songs were Mumia Abu Jamal, which he was a political activist and journalist and was accused of killing a white officer, which landed him in prison for life. But he claimed that he was not the one who shot the officer, but in the country, he was the one that was beaten and shot. Mutulu Shakur was Tupac's stepfather. He was locked up and accused of robbery, murder, and helping Assata Shakur escape. Rushell was one of the longest held political prisoners, and they said that he helped in the Marin County Courthouse rebellion, was later charged for aggravated kidnapping. Geronimo Pratt, he was Tupac's godfather,
He was a high-ranked member of the Black Panther Party and was accused of murder. Natasha Harlins. She was a 15-year-old girl who was shot because she was accused of stealing in a store. Later on, they realized that she actually had money to pay for the item that they accused her of stealing. Robert Sandiford, known as Lil Yummy, was an 11-year-old who was involved in a street gang called the Black Disciples. He was murdered by the gang because they were scared that he knew too much and was going to inform police and guide them to the gang. So for some connections for in today's world was this lyrics that he said, they say don't let this cruel world get you. Kind of suspicious worrying one day you might leave me for somebody that's richer. I feel like it can connect because there are many people who fear that anything that the rich want to take away, they will take away because they feel privileged and have the power to do what they want at any time. Many also fear that the rich can take something that they take for granted, but that we appreciate so much, they can take it away at any time as well. Another um, another quote that relates to today's world is it says, "Who knows what tomorrow brings? In this world where everyone's blind, and where to go no matter how far, I'll find to let you know that you're not alone." So for this one, many of us are taught and like forced to meet society's expectations because if you don't, usually they exclude you or judge you for who you are. Um, Many actually give in to trying to feel accepted by society, but sometimes even after all that, you're still not accepted because in the end, you're still different from them. You come from a different place. Those two quotes I connect to the previous readings of Ngugi, Decolonizing the Mind, and Some of Water and Spirit, because in those readings, they fear of the cultural bomb and being colonized because those things destroy and mess with people's culture and people are forced to be someone they're not. And in the end, that affects the person because they will be confused and not know where they actually belong. The final quote is all my ghetto motherfuckers be proud to be black if you proud to have this shit like this. Cause ain't nobody got it like this. All these motherfuckers wanna be like us. They all wanna be like us to be the have nots, all hail. God bless the child that can hold his own, no motherfucking doubt. So this quote, um, I can connect it because I feel like in today's society, some people are starting to embrace their culture and where they come from and are starting to learn to not be ashamed of who they are. And in the part where it says all these motherfuckers want to be like us, the way I took it is that many people as well try to steal other people's cultures and change them or sometimes um, disrespect it in a way. So that's how I connected it. And the last part can be a connection. And I feel like it was a message that he was telling us that we have to start teaching the younger generations to be able to stand their ground when someone tells them they can't be who they are. And that will conclude my presentation.
Montserrat, great job. Couple of things. One, you did it by yourself, so that even more hell of a job for doing it on your own. And then two, like off top, that's my favorite song of all time. So you having to take up that project and really doing a good job of articulating it and making it make sense for the class. Hats off to you. What I really liked is how you incorporated the readings, the theoretical framework, and then you also included the people in the song that Pac mentions, right? Latasha, Geronimo Pratt, Rochelle McGee. That's important because, you know, for people who study Pac, like if you're gonna do a real thorough analysis of Pac, you have to know what shaped Pac, right? You have to like look into his mom, who was a Black Panther, right? Who literally was pregnant with Pac in jail fighting political charges, right? So I thought you did a great job of situating Pac in his political history, right? So yeah, overall, great job. You know, where my only question to you, where would you situate the song as a conversation between Black men and Black women? If that makes sense. Because you say that the song he's writing to his either girlfriend or his wife, right? Um, why is that significant to you as you analyzed and made sense of the song?
I'm not sure, but probably because maybe I'm wrong, but since years ago, sometimes even now, women are seen as not having like much power, I guess. I don't know if that could be something, and like him making him realize that they actually have like a voice to say what they could do, and they can do anything that they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's no wrong interpretation, right? Does anybody else have any questions for or comments about Mashat's presentation? So I know we're gone a little bit over what I did want to do. How are you guys about knowing what journals to turn in? Are you guys okay with that? Or should I go with that?
I need a
Okay.
I need notions.
Yeah, let me give me 1 second, okay? So what we should be looking at. So for the first 3 weeks, we should have 3 readings. The next 3 weeks, there'll be another 3. So we're at 6 so far. We didn't read Morrison. So 8 after this week, 11. So that would be 11 going through week 15. And then you only had to pick one of the poems to do a journal entry on. So you should have about 12 entries to submit to me next Thursday, which is the day of our final. So Rhapsody's group, which is Breeza, Precious, and Mariana, you guys will present next Thursday, which is the day of the final. Everybody else, no worries, you guys are good to go. Since this is the last day of class for the rest of you, just want to thank you guys for taking the time with me to go through this semester. I know it was a little bit different, but I try to make it as accommodating and as entertaining and as engaging as I could with the tools that we have. Although this semester is in and I will no longer be your professor, if you guys have questions about anything, don't hesitate to reach out. You have questions about grad school, don't hesitate to reach out. Letters of recommendations, don't hesitate to reach out. Just anything, you know, I'm here and I'll be happy to converse with you. But truly, I learned a lot from you guys. I was inspired by just your ability to be critical and your ability to take on things that weren't really in your grade level, so to speak. Because to be honest with you guys, the majority of the stuff that you read is stuff that I covered in my PhD program, right? And the majority of you guys are coming straight out of high school into your first year of college. And if you're able to engage PhD level material in your first semester, there's no limit to what you guys could accomplish. So just take that with you and allow that to build you some intellectual confidence in your abilities to be scholars, because that's what you are. And continue to question, continue to be critical. Other than that, be safe, be well, and holler at me if you need anything. Peace.